The young cowboy fed an Apache widow, unaware of the desire in her eyes. The sun had just begun to rise over the rolling plains, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and gold. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of dry grass and the faint smoke from distant chimneys. Tommy Walker rode slowly along the winding dirt path, his horse's hooves stirring small clouds of dust with each step. Bracy. He was young, barely 20, with a lean frame and a face that showed both curiosity and determination. Life on the frontier was hard, but Tommy had learned to carry himself with quiet confidence, even when the world seemed vast and unforgiving. Breath. Tommy had been traveling for several days, delivering supplies from one small settlement to another. He enjoyed the solitude of the open land, the rhythm of riding, and the simple satisfaction of being useful. But this morning felt different. As he rounded a bend, he noticed smoke curling from a small cabin near the edge of a grove. It was not a familiar homestead. The cabin was modest, made of weathered wood, with a small garden and a few clothes hanging on a line. Near the doorway, a woman struggled with a pot over a fire. She was bending low, her movements careful but clumsy, and the morning light caught her dark hair and the smooth, serious expression on her face. Curiosity piqued.
Something about the woman's presence struck him.
She moved with a quiet grace, even as she juggled the tasks before her. The pot she carried seemed heavy for her slight frame, and the fire's smoke made her cough. Tommy's heart, always sensitive to the needs of others, went out to her immediately. Without overthinking, he rode closer and called out, keeping his voice gentle. Rest. Morning. You need some help with that? The woman looked up, startled, her dark eyes meeting his for a brief moment. There was a flicker of caution, perhaps even suspicion, but it was quickly replaced with a soft, grateful smile. Thank you, she said simply. It's just a little breakfast, but the fire isn't behaving today. Her voice was quiet but steady, carrying a warmth that made Tommy feel unexpectedly at ease. Tommy dismounted and approached, careful not to startle her or her surroundings. Mind if I lend a hand? He asked. I've got some experience with fires and cooking outdoors. Might make this morning a bit easier for you.
She hesitated for a heartbeat, then nodded. I appreciate it.
It's not often someone stops by out here. Her words were simple, but Tommy sensed an unspoken loneliness beneath them. Life in the frontier was isolating, and it seemed she had been managing on her own for some time. As he set to work, Tommy noticed the small details around her home. There were children's shoes by the doorway, tiny and worn, suggesting she had young ones to care for. The garden was small, but tended with care, rows of vegetables pushing through the soil despite the hard ground. Her life was modest, and yet there was pride and effort in everything she did. Tommy admired that, silently, feeling a deep respect growing within him. Together they managed to get the fire under control, and Tommy helped lift the pot onto a safer spot. He offered to fetch some water from the nearby stream, and she accepted, motioning toward the path through the trees. As he walked, Tommy allowed himself a moment to observe her from a distance. She stood at the doorway, hands resting lightly on the wooden frame, watching him with a look that was hard to read. There was a subtle intensity in her eyes, a quiet strength mingled with something softer, something almost tender. Tommy didn't notice it at first, so wrapped up was he in the practical task at hand. But there was an unmistakable warmth in the way she watched him. When he returned with the water, he found her stirring the contents of the pot, carefully tasting the mixture.
It's better than I expected, she said with a small laugh, a sound that seemed to brighten the morning.
Tommy smiled, feeling a rare sense of satisfaction. It was a simple act, helping someone cook breakfast, but it felt meaningful in a way that stayed with him. He realized then that the frontier was not just about survival. It was about connection, small gestures that carried weight far beyond what they seemed. They worked in companionable silence, exchanging the occasional word or small observation about the weather, the land, or the animals nearby. Tommy noticed how capable she was, even as she struggled with the heavy pot. There was a quiet determination in her movements, a sense that she would do whatever it took to provide for herself and her children. It made him admire her even more. He didn't consider that there might be other emotions in play, that her glances held more than gratitude. He only saw a woman who needed help and a chance to offer it. After the meal was ready, they sat down on the porch steps to eat. Tommy offered to let her serve herself first, but she shook her head, insisting they share it together. They spoke sparingly, letting the morning pass in peaceful companionship. The conversation was simple, sometimes awkward, sometimes easy, but always genuine. Tommy learned that her name was Maya, that she had lost her husband the previous year, and that she was doing her best to care for her children alone. She spoke with honesty, without complaint, and there was a quiet dignity in her voice that made Tommy respect her deeply. As they ate, Tommy found himself noticing small things. The curve of her smile, the way her eyes caught the sunlight, the gentle way she tended to the children when they appeared at the doorway. Shy, but curious. He felt a strange mixture of admiration and protectiveness, though he didn't recognize it as the stirrings of something more. To him, she was simply a person in need of kindness, and he was willing to provide it. By the time Tommy finished his meal, the sun was higher in the sky, warming the porch and casting long shadows across the ground. He rose, brushing crumbs from his pants, and offered to continue on his journey. Brown. Maya thanked him sincerely, her voice carrying a weight that made him pause.
"You've been very kind," she said, her eyes meeting his.
There was a depth there, something unspoken. But Tommy only nodded, feeling a sense of quiet fulfillment. "Take care on your travels," he replied. It was no trouble at all. As Tommy mounted his horse and prepared to leave, he glanced back at her cabin, at the small garden, at the woman who had unknowingly captured his attention. There was a subtle longing in her eyes, he realized, a quiet acknowledgement of his presence. But he didn't interpret it in that way. In his mind, the morning had been a simple act of kindness, a brief connection in the vastness of the frontier. He spurred his horse forward, the dust rising behind him, and felt a sense of peace. He had helped someone in need, and in return he had received something unexpected, a glimpse into a life so different from his own, yet strangely familiar in its struggles and hopes. As he rode away, Tommy couldn't help thinking about Maya and her children. There was a softness in his heart, a new awareness of the fragile beauty in human connections, perhaps. He promised himself that if fate allowed, he would return to see them again, to offer help where it was needed, and perhaps, in time, to understand the subtle messages that words alone could not convey. The morning sun climbed higher, and the open plains stretched endlessly before him, filled with possibilities, challenges, and the quiet hope of encounters yet to come. Little did Tommy know, his simple act of kindness had left a lasting impression on Maya. Her thoughts lingered on the young cowboy long after he disappeared from view, the warmth of his presence stirring feelings she had not dared to name. She watched the trail of dust settle, a faint smile touching her lips, and for the first time in months she felt a flicker of hope, a quiet anticipation of the unexpected, the possibility that life might hold more than survival, that perhaps kindness could open the door to something deeper, something profoundly human. The plains were silent once more, the wind whispering through the grass, carrying with it the memory of a morning that would not be forgotten. Tommy rode on, unaware of the desire hidden in Maya's eyes, unaware that a simple meal had become the beginning of a story far greater than either of them could yet imagine. The days following Tommy's first visit passed quietly, with the plains bathed in warm sunlight and the occasional cry of distant birds. Maya returned to her routine, tending her small garden, preparing meals, and caring for her children, all the while replaying the brief encounter with the young cowboy in her mind. She found herself smiling at simple memories. The way he had approached her so kindly, the way he had taken care of the fire, the gentle tone of his voice. There was something about him that stirred a feeling she had not experienced in a long time, a mixture of comfort and curiosity, and a faint hope she tried to keep hidden.
Meanwhile, Tommy could not forget her either.
As he rode through the open plains on his deliveries, he found his thoughts returning to the modest cabin and the woman who had welcomed him without hesitation. He remembered the way she had handled her chores with determination, the quiet strength in her voice, and the small, fleeting smile she had given him. There was a gentleness in her, but also a resilience that made him respect her. For a young cowboy used to the roughness of frontier life, this combination was rare and captivating. It was only natural, then, that when he finished his deliveries a few days later, he found himself riding back toward her cabin. The wind was cool that morning, carrying the fresh scent of dew on grass, and the sun was just beginning to climb over the horizon. Dio. Tommy rode slowly, allowing himself to enjoy the serenity of the open land. He could see the cabin from a distance and noticed Maya already outside tending to her garden. She turned slightly at the sound of his horse, and her eyes widened briefly before settling into recognition. A faint blush rose to her cheeks, and she smiled, small but sincere. "Good morning," Tommy called, dismounting carefully. "Thought I'd stop by and see if you needed any help today?" Maya straightened, brushing her hands on her apron. Bration.
"You're very kind to keep coming," she said, her voice carrying a mixture of gratitude and something softer she could not yet name. "I appreciate it."
Tommy offered a shrug, modest and unassuming.
"It's nothing. I just like to help when I can."
"Besides, it gives me a chance to see how you're doing." For a moment, they simply watched each other, the quiet air filled with unspoken thoughts. Maya noticed the way he looked at her, not with judgment or expectation, but with genuine interest. Tommy, on the other hand, was focused on the practical matters at hand, still unaware of the deeper feelings she harbored. He moved toward the fire pit where the morning meal would be prepared, eager to assist. Together they worked side by side, Maya chopping vegetables while Tommy tended to the fire and arranged the cooking utensils. Their conversation was light at first, about the weather, the soil, and the challenges of frontier life. Yet, gradually, it deepened. Tommy asked her about her children, and she shared stories of their laughter, their curiosity, and the ways they reminded her of their late father. There was a softness in her voice as she spoke, a tenderness that made Tommy feel protective and, in a way, honored to be trusted with her stories. At one point, Tommy reached over to adjust the firewood, and his hand brushed hers. The contact was brief, almost accidental, but Maya felt a warmth spread through her chest. She looked at him quickly, hoping he would not notice, and found that he had already returned his attention to the fire. She smiled faintly, a mixture of embarrassment and delight, realizing that her feelings were becoming harder to conceal. As they prepared the meal, Tommy shared stories from his travels, tales of encounters with other settlers, the challenges of moving supplies across difficult terrain, and moments of humor that made her laugh quietly. Maya had not laughed so freely in months, and the sound, soft and melodic, lingered in Tommy's mind longer than he expected. For a few hours, the hardships of life, the loneliness, the worry, the struggles of survival seemed to fade, replaced by companionship and a sense of shared purpose. After the meal was ready, they sat together on the porch, enjoying the food and the warmth of the sun. The children, curious and shy at first, approached cautiously, drawn by the sight of Tommy and the scent of the cooked meal. Maya greeted them with gentle words, and Tommy offered a small joke, earning a few giggles and a shy smile from the youngest. Watching this interaction, Tommy felt a deep respect for Maya's strength and care. It was clear that despite the hardships she faced, she had created a home filled with love and attention, and he admired her for it. The conversation turned to dreams and hopes. Maya spoke of her desire to see her children grow up healthy and happy, of the hope that someday she could create a life that was not just about survival but also about joy and stability. Tommy shared his own dreams, simple as they were, traveling safely, helping where he could, and finding meaningful connections in a world that often felt lonely and harsh. They found common ground in their hopes for the future, a subtle understanding forming between them. As the morning wore on, Tommy noticed that the light in Maya's eyes seemed to linger on him longer than necessary. There was a quiet longing there, a desire for connection that went beyond friendship, though he did not yet recognize it. He was still focused on being helpful and kind, unaware of the deeper emotions at play. Yet there was something in the way she watched him, a subtle invitation that his young heart could not fully comprehend. When it was time for him to leave, Tommy felt a tug of reluctance he could not explain.
He had come to enjoy these visits more than he expected, finding comfort and warmth in Maya's presence.
Bree, I should be moving on, he said, mounting his horse with a sigh, but I'll come back soon to check on you and the children. Maya's lips curved into a small smile and her eyes held an emotion she did not voice. I'll look forward to it, she replied softly. There was a pause, a quiet moment of understanding between them, before Tommy spurred his horse and rode off, leaving a trail of dust behind him. For Maya, the afternoon stretched slowly. She returned to her chores, but her thoughts kept returning to Tommy.
There was a mixture of admiration, gratitude, and a fluttering emotion she struggled to name. She found herself replaying his words, the sound of his voice, the kindness in his gestures, and the gentle manner in which he had treated her and her children.
It was more than gratitude. It was something deeper, something she had not allowed herself to feel in a long time. Tommy, on his journey to the next settlement, thought about Maya as well. He recognized that he felt a connection, a sense of ease and comfort he rarely experienced with others. Yet he told himself that it was simply the bond of friendship and mutual respect. The idea that there could be more was not yet part of his understanding, though a quiet curiosity began to stir in his heart. The days continued in this rhythm, bringing supplies, helping with chores, and sharing stories. Maya welcomed him with quiet delight, grateful not just for the assistance, but for the company. The children grew fond of him, laughing and playing around his boots, and he found himself caring for them in a protective, gentle way. The connection between Tommy and Maya deepened without words, a subtle trust and warmth forming in the quiet moments they shared. Yet beneath the surface, emotions swirled unspoken. Maya's glances lingered, her smiles held more warmth, and her touch, though fleeting, carried an unspoken message. Tommy remained largely unaware, focused on kindness and friendship, though the ease of her company and the joy of shared moments began to leave an impression on his heart. They were two people from different worlds, drawn together by circumstance, compassion, and the simple human need for connection. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned shades of pink and purple, Tommy and Maya sat together on the porch steps watching the children play in the garden. There was a comfortable silence, the kind that comes from genuine understanding and mutual respect. Maya glanced at Tommy, her eyes reflecting the fading light, and for a brief moment she allowed herself to imagine a future where kindness and connection could grow into something more. Tommy, unaware of the depth of her feelings, simply enjoyed the peace of the moment, feeling a sense of belonging that he had rarely known. In that quiet evening, the bond between them strengthened, unspoken yet undeniable. Each visit, each shared task, and each story told brought them closer, even if Tommy did not yet recognize the full meaning of the emotions at play. Maya's hope blossomed quietly, a fragile yet persistent belief that kindness could transform lives and that perhaps, in time, two people from different paths could find their way to each other. As Tommy rode away once more, the sun setting behind the hills, both he and Maya carried the memory of the day with them, a memory of shared laughter, simple tasks completed together, and a connection that promised something more. Though unspoken and largely unrecognized, it was a beginning, the first step in a story that neither could yet fully understand, but which would shape the days and experiences to come. The plains were quiet once more, the wind moving gently through the tall grass, and the world seemed full of possibilities. For Tommy and Maya, life on the frontier continued, but now it was colored with a new sense of companionship, trust, and the faintest stirrings of an emotion neither had named, yet both would come to feel more deeply with time. The early morning sun cast a golden glow over the plains, but the peace of the frontier was beginning to feel fragile. Tommy Walker had grown accustomed to his visits to Maya's cabin, finding comfort in her company and in the laughter of her children. Each day brought new stories, small tasks completed together, and moments of quiet understanding. Yet, with each visit, the world outside seemed to grow a little more watchful, and Tommy could feel, though he did not yet understand it, that the lives of those around them carried a judgment he could neither escape nor ignore. That morning, Tommy arrived with a basket of fresh bread he had bought from a nearby settlement and a few preserved fruits he had packed carefully. The ride had been long, but he felt a sense of excitement as he approached the cabin. The children were playing near the garden, and Maya was already outside, tending to the small vegetable rows. She looked up as he approached, her eyes lighting with recognition and something warmer that she did not yet name. "Good morning," Tommy called, dismounting and adjusting his hat. "Good morning," Maya replied softly, her voice carrying a mix of gratitude and quiet anticipation. She stepped aside to let him in, gesturing toward the porch where they would prepare the morning meal.
As they worked together, Tommy noticed subtle changes in Maya.
She laughed more easily now. Her movements were more relaxed, and there was a lightness in her eyes when she glanced at him.
The children, too, had grown comfortable around him, following his movements and asking him questions about his travels.
Tommy felt a growing warmth in his heart, though he still viewed it as friendship and companionship. It was during this morning that the first signs of tension began to appear. A group of townspeople curious about the young cowboy's frequent visits had begun to spread whispers through the small settlements. Rumors were never fully understood or accurate, but they traveled quickly, carrying suspicion and judgment. Some claimed Tommy was taking advantage of the widow, while others hinted at impropriety in the friendship. None of it had been confirmed, but the words reached Maya through passing travelers, and she felt a pang of discomfort. Tommy, unaware of the gossip, continued his routine with cheerful oblivion. He carried water, helped with the fire, and shared stories from his journeys. But, as the morning progressed, a stranger arrived unexpectedly.
It was one of the neighboring settlers, a man who had heard the rumors and sought to confirm them. His tone was polite, but heavy with scrutiny.
"Tommy Walker," he said, nodding toward the young cowboy. "I hear you've been spending a lot of time here." His eyes flicked to Maya. Then back to Tommy. "People talk, you know. But some say it's not proper for a man to visit a widow so often." Tommy stiffened, caught off guard. But to swear was past awkward, and his mouth to explain. But the words felt awkward and insufficient. "I'm just helping," he said finally, his voice steady though firm. "I bring supplies. I help with chores. That's all." The man's gaze lingered on Maya, who had stepped behind Tommy slightly, protective and silent. "Still," the man said, "some folks might not see it that way." He turned and walked away, leaving a weight of unease in the air. Maya exhaled slowly, trying to maintain composure. She had been aware of the gossip, but had not expected it to be so direct. "Don't let it bother you," she said quietly to Tommy, her hand resting briefly on his arm. "People will always talk, but you know the truth of it." Tommy nodded, though a flicker of frustration crossed his face. He was not used to being judged unfairly, especially for acts of kindness. "I just wish they would mind their own business," he muttered, shaking his head. "I didn't come here to cause trouble. I only wanted to help." Maya's eyes softened. She could see the honesty in him, the genuine desire to do good without expecting anything in return. Her heart ached slightly at the thought that others might misinterpret the simple bond they shared. She looked at him, seeing not only a helper but a young man of integrity and warmth, and she realized how deeply she cared for him. Yet she also understood the reality of their situation. The world outside was harsh and judgmental, and the connection she felt could be easily misunderstood. As the day went on, Tommy and Maya continued their work. They repaired a section of the fence around the garden, moved firewood, and prepared another meal for the children. Throughout the tasks, Maya found herself glancing at Tommy, her eyes lingering in a way that conveyed more than words could express. She caught herself imagining moments where he might look at her the same way, though she quickly chastised herself for indulging in such thoughts. The frontier was unforgiving, and the last thing she wanted was to create more gossip or difficulties for him. Despite the tension, there were moments of lightness. Tommy told stories of his adventures, sometimes exaggerating for effect, which made Maya and the children laugh. They shared small jokes, and for a while, the world outside the cabin seemed distant and irrelevant, but yet the shadow of misunderstanding lingered, a subtle reminder that kindness and companionship were often scrutinized in a way that honesty could not always protect. In the evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned a soft pink, Tommy prepared to leave. He had promised to continue on his deliveries, but he lingered, reluctant to part from the cabin and the warmth it offered. Maya handed him a small bundle of fresh herbs from her garden, a gesture of appreciation and perhaps more, though she did not articulate it. "Thank you," he said, tucking the bundle into his saddlebag.
"I'll take good care of these. Be careful on your travels," Maya replied, her voice soft, carrying a subtle weight of emotion.
As Tommy mounted his horse, he felt the familiar tug of reluctance, a quiet longing he could not fully explain. He rode off slowly, glancing back at the cabin and the woman who had captured his attention without realizing it. Maya watched him disappear into the distance, her heart heavy with unspoken feelings and a mixture of hope and worry. That night, Maya sat by the fire, reflecting on the day. She thought about the way Tommy had helped her, the ease with which he had connected with her children, and the moments when their eyes had met with understanding. She realized that her admiration had grown into something deeper, something she could no longer dismiss. Yet, she knew the risks of acknowledging it openly. The whispers of the townspeople were a constant reminder that emotions could be misinterpreted and that caution was necessary. Tommy, too, lay under the stars that evening, thinking about Maya. He felt a quiet longing for her company and the peace he experienced in her presence. He understood the bond they shared, even if he could not yet fully name the emotions it evoked. There was a pull between them, subtle and unspoken, shaped by kindness, respect, and an emerging sense of connection that neither fully comprehended. Days passed and the tension of misunderstanding continued to hover over their interactions. Tommy remained steadfast in his visits, showing kindness without expectation, while Maya navigated the delicate balance of her emotions and the scrutiny of the outside world. Their connection deepened, built on trust, shared experiences, and the understanding that their bond was genuine and meaningful, even if others might misinterpret it. One afternoon, a minor incident tested their resolve. A stray calf wandered into Maya's garden, trampling the vegetables she had carefully tended. Tommy sprang into action, helping to guide the animal back to the nearby pasture. As they worked together, Maya laughed despite the frustration of the situation, and Tommy's heart swelled with a protective affection. It was a small, ordinary event, yet it highlighted the seamless way they complemented each other, the quiet teamwork that had become second nature between them. As the sun set, they paused to catch their breath, leaning on the fence and watching the orange glow fade into twilight. Maya's eyes met Tommy's, and for a fleeting moment the unspoken feelings between them were nearly tangible. "Tommy," still unaware of the depth of her desire, felt a connection that went beyond friendship, a sense of warmth and belonging that he could not ignore. Maya, sensing his hesitation, chose to remain silent, letting the moment pass without words, knowing that the foundation of their bond was stronger than any confession.
That evening, as Tommy rode away once more, the whispers of the townspeople echoed faintly in his mind.
He dismissed them with a shake of his head, focusing instead on the genuine connection he had with Maya and her children.
He knew that acts of kindness often faced scrutiny, but he also understood that the truth of his intentions was evident in the bond he shared with the family.
Maya watched him leave, her heart heavy with emotion yet filled with hope, knowing that their story was unfolding, one careful step at a time. The frontier remained vast and challenging, but in the midst of whispers, misunderstandings, and the uncertainty of the world, Tommy and Maya had found a connection that was resilient and real. Their bond was a quiet force, growing stronger with each shared task, each story told, and each moment of mutual understanding. The tension of the outside world only highlighted the value of their companionship, reminding them both that true connections are often forged in the face of challenges and remain steadfast when nurtured with care. And so, life continued on the plains, filled with the rhythm of work, the laughter of children, and the quiet pull of emotions neither fully understood, but both felt deeply. Tommy and Maya's story was far from over, and the days ahead promised further challenges, discoveries, and moments that would test their patience, courage, and hearts. Yet beneath it all there was an undeniable bond, a foundation of trust, kindness, and emerging love waiting to be recognized and embraced. The morning sun rose slowly over the plains, casting long shadows across the cabin and the small garden Maya had tended so carefully. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of dew and wildflowers, and the gentle sound of the nearby creek added a soothing rhythm to the quiet world. Tommy Walker rode along the familiar path, his horse moving steadily as he carried a small bundle of supplies for Maya and her children. He had grown used to these visits, each one strengthening the bond between him and the widow. Yet he remained unaware of the deeper emotions that flickered in her eyes each time he approached. Maya was already outside when he arrived, sweeping the porch and humming softly to herself. The children played nearby, their laughter bright against the soft rustling of the trees. She glanced up at the sound of hooves and felt a familiar flutter in her chest. It was more than anticipation. It was something she had tried to hide, but could no longer deny. Tommy dismounted, greeting her with a warm smile, unaware of the subtle tension that passed between them. "Good morning," he said, brushing the dust from his pants. "I brought some fresh supplies for you and the children." "Thank you," Maya replied, her voice soft yet steady. She stepped aside to let him enter the porch, careful to maintain her composure. There was a moment of quiet as they arranged the bread, fruits, and vegetables he had brought, a silent understanding passing between them that neither fully acknowledged. As they worked together, the day began with the usual routine, preparing breakfast, tending to the children, and organizing the small garden.
Yet there was a sense of anticipation in the air, an unspoken awareness that something different might happen today.
Maya found herself stealing glances at Tommy, her heart quickening at the sight of him carefully arranging the food. She noticed the way his hands moved with ease, the way his eyes lit up when he spoke to the children, and a warmth spread through her chest that was difficult to contain. Tommy, for his part, was entirely focused on helping, unaware of the longing that had begun to linger in Maya's gaze. He enjoyed the companionship and the sense of purpose that these visits brought, yet a quiet pull toward her had begun to form, a subtle feeling that he could not yet name, though it tugged at his heart each time he prepared to leave. The turning point of the day came unexpectedly. While Maya was gathering water from the creek, one of the children stumbled near the bank, slipping on the wet stones. The child cried out, and Maya rushed forward, her heart pounding with fear. Tommy reacted instantly, running to the edge and steadying the child before he fell into the water. The moment was brief but intense, and for a heartbeat, their hands touched as they both reached to hold the child safe. Maya looked into Tommy's eyes, and for the first time she saw the depth of care and concern that he truly felt. There was no pretense, no hesitation, only a genuine desire to protect and help. Her chest tightened with emotion, and she realized how much she had come to rely on him, not just for practical assistance, but for the quiet strength he brought into her life. After the child was safe, they stood side by the creek, breathing heavily from the rush of adrenaline. Tommy finally looked at Maya, noticing the subtle tremor in her hands and the softness in her eyes that he had not seen before. He felt a warmth spread through him, a new awareness of the feelings that had been growing quietly in his heart. "You scared me," Maya admitted softly, her voice almost a whisper. "I'm sorry," Tommy said, shaking his head. "I should have been more careful with the children." He hesitated, then added, "You're very brave, Maya. You handled that just fine." Her eyes met his, and in that moment, words were unnecessary. There was a connection, a silent understanding that went beyond friendship. Maya felt a surge of emotion, a mix of admiration, gratitude, and something more. Something that had been simmering beneath the surface for weeks. Tommy, for the first time, felt a spark of awareness that his feelings for her were deeper than he had realized. The rest of the day passed in a mix of ordinary tasks and quiet reflection. They repaired a section of the fence near the garden, fetched water, and prepared a simple meal. Yet the earlier incident at the creek had shifted something between them. The air seemed charged with emotion, a subtle tension that neither could fully articulate but both felt keenly. Maya found herself laughing a little more easily, her eyes lingering on Tommy longer than usual. Tommy noticed the warmth in her gaze, though he was still hesitant to fully confront his own feelings. As the afternoon sun began to fade, a gentle breeze stirred the tall grass and the children played quietly nearby. Maya and Tommy sat together on the porch, their hands brushing occasionally as they worked with the herbs and vegetables. The silence between them was comfortable, yet it carried a weight of unspoken words. Each glance, each smile, seemed to speak volumes without a single sound being uttered. Maya's heart ached with a mixture of longing and caution. She wanted to reach out, to express the depth of her feelings, but she feared the consequences, the judgment of others, the potential harm to the fragile sense of stability she had built for herself and her children. She chose instead to let the moments speak for themselves, hoping that Tommy might eventually understand what she could not say aloud. Tommy, meanwhile, felt a growing awareness that his bond with Maya was no longer just friendship. There was a pull, a desire to be near her, to protect her and to share in her life more fully. Yet he hesitated, unsure how to navigate these new emotions, unsure how Maya felt, and aware of the scrutiny of the world outside the cabin. He did not want to rush anything or risk damaging the trust they had built. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the plains, they worked together to prepare the evening meal. Maya's children helped where they could, their laughter filling the air and easing the tension that had built during the day. Tommy and Maya moved with quiet coordination, their actions smooth and familiar, reflecting the growing closeness between them. After the meal, they sat together on the porch steps, watching the stars appear in the deepening sky. The world around them was quiet, the only sounds the gentle rustling of leaves and the distant cry of a night bird. In that stillness, Maya finally allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. She glanced at Tommy, her eyes reflecting the faint light of the stars, and for a brief instant, she let her feelings show. There was longing, hope, and trust in that look, a silent invitation that spoke more than words ever could. Tommy met her gaze, feeling a stirring within him that he could no longer ignore.
There was a clarity in her eyes,
a quiet honesty that touched something deep in his heart.
He realized, in that moment, that his care for Maya had grown into something more profound, a feeling that demanded recognition and honesty. Yet he remained patient, choosing to respect her space and the slow unfolding of their connection. The children, tired from the day's activities, eventually drifted off to sleep, leaving Tommy and Maya alone on the porch. The night air was cool and calm, carrying the scent of earth and grass. They spoke softly, sharing stories of the stars, memories of their past, and dreams for the future. Each word, each shared moment, drew them closer together, building a foundation of trust, respect, and emerging love. As Tommy prepared to leave once more, he hesitated, his hand resting briefly on the railing near hers. There was a quiet intensity in the air, a sense that something had shifted irreversibly. Maya's eyes met his, and she felt a flicker of hope, a belief that their connection could grow into something lasting and meaningful. "Tomorrow," Tommy said finally, his voice soft. "I'll come by early. I want to help with the garden before it gets too hot." "I'll look forward to it," Maya replied, her voice carrying the weight of unspoken emotion. As he rode away, the sky darkened to deep indigo, and the first stars appeared twinkling faintly above the plains. Both Tommy and Maya felt the change in their relationship. Their bond had deepened, tested by the day's events and strengthened by shared experience. There was a new awareness of their feelings, a quiet understanding that something more than friendship was blossoming, though it remained unspoken and tentative. The night was calm, but their hearts were full, each carrying the memory of the day, and the knowledge that their lives were slowly intertwining in ways neither could have anticipated. The frontier remained challenging, unpredictable, and sometimes harsh, but for Tommy and Maya, it had also become a place of connection, trust, and the quiet possibility of love.
In the stillness of the night, they each reflected on the day, aware that the turning point had arrived.
The events at the creek, the shared work, and the quiet moments together had revealed a depth of emotion that could no longer be ignored. Their bond was real, strong, and growing, and they both felt the subtle pull toward one another, a force that would shape the days and experiences to come. As the plains slept under the soft glow of the moon, Tommy rode home slowly, thinking of Maya and the moments they had shared. He understood now that his feelings were deeper than simple friendship, that the connection he felt was rare and precious. Maya, sitting quietly by her cabin, gazed at the stars, her heart filled with a mixture of hope, longing, and a quiet certainty that the young cowboy had become an important part of her life, someone she trusted, admired, and quietly loved. The turning point of their story had arrived, and neither of them would ever be the same. The bond between Tommy and Maya had grown stronger, tested by circumstance and illuminated by shared courage and care. In the quiet frontier night, the first sparks of something lasting and meaningful had been ignited, a promise of connection, trust, and the slow unfolding of love that neither could yet fully name but both would come to understand. The morning sun rose slowly, painting the plains with soft golden light. The wind carried the faint scent of grass and earth, and the quiet hum of nature filled the air. Tommy Walker rode toward Maya's cabin, his heart lighter than it had been in weeks. He had spent the previous nights thinking about her children, and about the bond that had grown between them. The events of the last days, the shared meals, the laughter, the quiet moments, and the small crises they had faced together had awakened feelings in him that were undeniable. Yet he was determined to approach today with care, mindful of the fragile trust that existed between them. When Tommy arrived, Maya was outside tending to her garden, her movements graceful and steady. The children played nearby, their laughter bright and carefree, a sound that warmed Tommy's heart. Maya looked up at him as he dismounted, and for a moment the world seemed to pause. Their eyes met, and in that quiet exchange, an unspoken understanding passed between them. There was trust, mutual respect, and a growing awareness of the feelings that had been blossoming quietly over time. Good morning, Tommy said, adjusting the bundle of fresh bread and fruit he had brought. Good morning, Maya replied softly, her voice carrying warmth and something more, a quiet hope she had nurtured in her heart for days. Together they carried the supplies into the cabin and began preparing breakfast. The air was filled with the scent of fresh bread and cooked vegetables, and the children eagerly watched, helping where they could. Tommy and Maya moved with ease, their actions coordinated as though they had been working together for years. There was a comfort in the routine, yet beneath it a deeper connection had formed, an awareness of each other's presence, a subtle warmth that neither could ignore. As they worked, Tommy noticed the way Maya's eyes lingered on him, the soft smile she offered when she caught his gaze, and the quiet strength she carried even in the smallest tasks. It stirred something deep within him, a mixture of admiration, protectiveness, and a desire to be close to her in a way he had never experienced before. He realized that his feelings were no longer simple friendship. They were something stronger, something that demanded honesty and courage. After breakfast, they stepped outside to tend to the garden. The sun was higher now, casting a warm glow over the plants and the small fence that surrounded the cabin. Tommy suggested they plant a few new vegetables, and Maya agreed with enthusiasm. As they worked, their hands occasionally brushed, and each touch carried a quiet electricity. The children played nearby, but there was a sense of intimacy in the moments they shared, a rhythm that neither needed to name. The day passed in a blend of work and quiet conversation. Tommy and Maya shared stories of their pasts, their hopes, and their dreams. Maya spoke of the future she wanted for her children, a life filled with stability, joy, and love. Tommy listened, offering encouragement and sharing his own dreams of adventure and meaningful connection. Each story, each shared word, deepened their bond and strengthened the trust between them. As the afternoon sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the plains, a gentle breeze stirred the grass. Tommy and Maya paused their work, leaning against the fence and watching the children play. The moment was peaceful, yet charged with unspoken emotion. Maya glanced at Tommy, her eyes reflecting the soft light of the setting sun, and allowed herself to feel the longing that had been growing in her heart. "Tommy," she said quietly, her voice hesitant yet steady, "thank you for everything you've done for us. For me, and for the children." Breath. Tommy turned to her, his expression open and sincere. "It's been my choice, Maya. I want to help because I care, not just for the children, but for you too." Maya's heart skipped a beat. The words were simple, yet they carried weight beyond measure. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of relief, hope, and a quiet joy she had not allowed herself to feel in a long time. For a moment, neither spoke, letting the silence hold the meaning of the words between them. The sun finally set, painting the sky in hues of pink, orange, and purple. Tommy and Maya walked together to the edge of the cabin property, watching the colors reflect on the distant hills. The children, tired from the day's activities, were settling down nearby, their laughter replaced by soft whispers and the occasional yawn. Tommy turned to Maya, his eyes holding a steady warmth. "I've been thinking," he said softly, "about how much this place, and you, mean to me. I didn't realize it at first, but now I see I care more than I can say." Maya felt her breath catch in her throat. The words she had longed to hear, the acknowledgement of the bond that had been growing between them, were finally spoken. She reached out, her hand brushing his gently.
"I care too, Tommy," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion she felt.
"I have for some time, though I was unsure how to tell you." A quiet understanding passed between them, a mutual recognition of feelings that had been simmering for weeks. They stood together in the twilight, hands barely touching, yet the connection was undeniable. For both of them, the world seemed to pause, as if the frontier itself was holding its breath, allowing this moment of honesty and vulnerability to exist without interruption.
As night fell, they returned to the cabin.
Tommy helped Maya secure the children's bedtime, reading a small story to them and earning smiles and laughter. The simple act of caring for the children together felt natural, reinforcing the bond they shared. There was a sense of family forming, a quiet hope that they could build a life filled with trust, kindness, and love. After the children were asleep, Tommy and Maya sat together by the fire. The room was warm and quiet, lit only by the soft glow of the flames. Maya looked at Tommy, her eyes reflecting both the firelight and the emotions she felt.
"I never thought I could feel this way again," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper.
Tommy reached out, taking her hand gently in his.
"Neither did I," he said.
"But I'm glad we have found each other. I want to be here with you and the children as much as I can." They sat together in silence for a while, holding hands and feeling the quiet comfort of shared presence. There was no rush, no need for grand gestures. The bond they had formed over meals, work, laughter, and shared moments of vulnerability was strong, and it carried a promise of something lasting. The following days passed in a rhythm that felt both ordinary and extraordinary. Tommy continued his visits, bringing supplies, helping with chores, and sharing stories. Maya welcomed him with quiet joy, grateful not only for his assistance but for his presence and the love that had begun to grow between them. The children grew more comfortable laughing and playing without hesitation, and Tommy found himself feeling a sense of belonging he had rarely known. Through small acts of kindness, shared work, and quiet conversations, their connection strengthened. Each glance, each touch, and each word carried meaning, building a foundation of trust and affection. They discovered the beauty in simple moments, the laughter of children, the warmth of shared meals, the quiet satisfaction of a day's work completed together. And beneath it all, a deeper feeling had emerged, a love that was patient, respectful, and sincere. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant hills and the sky turned deep shades of purple and gold, Tommy and Maya walked along the small path near the cabin. The air was cool, carrying the scent of wild flowers and earth. They spoke softly, sharing thoughts and reflections on the days that had passed, and for a moment the world outside seemed distant and unimportant.
"I feel like we can face anything," Maya said, her voice steady, her eyes holding a quiet strength.
"As long as we are together." Tommy nodded, squeezing her hand gently. "We can."
"And we will. I promise to be here, with you, through whatever comes."
There was a sense of resolution in the air, a quiet confidence that their bond was strong enough to endure the challenges of frontier life. The trials they had faced, the isolation, the hardships, and the whispers of the outside world had only strengthened their connection. They had discovered that trust, kindness, and shared effort could create something lasting, something that could flourish even in the harshest conditions. As night settled over the plains, Tommy and Maya returned to the cabin, hand in hand. The children slept peacefully, and the small home was filled with warmth and quiet contentment. For the first time in months, Maya allowed herself to feel fully safe, fully cared for, and fully connected. Tommy, too, felt a sense of belonging and purpose, knowing that he was part of something meaningful, something that went beyond himself. The frontier remained vast and challenging, but for Tommy and Maya, it had also become a place of hope, love, and possibility. Their bond had grown through acts of kindness, moments of courage, and the quiet acknowledgement of feelings that had long been unspoken. Now they could face the future together, supported by trust, respect, and the warmth of a connection that neither could have anticipated, but both had come to cherish deeply. And so life continued, filled with work, laughter, and shared moments of joy. The plains stretched endlessly before them. But for Tommy and Maya, each day held the promise of companionship, understanding, and the slow, steady growth of love. They had found something rare and beautiful in the midst of hardship, a bond that would endure, strengthen, and guide them through the days and years to come. In the quiet of the night, as the stars twinkled above the plains and the world seemed peaceful, Tommy and Maya sat together hand in hand, hearts intertwined. The journey had been long, the challenges many, but the reward was a connection that was genuine, enduring, and full of hope. Their story, once uncertain and fragile, had reached a place of clarity, trust, and the quiet certainty that they were no longer alone. And in that simple, profound understanding, both Tommy and Maya knew that their lives had changed forever. Forever connected by kindness, trust, and the first sparks of a love that would continue to grow with each passing day.